What's good, YouTube? It's Rico here, and I've got a deck profile for Infernoble Knight. Obviously, very early, like preliminary-ish build of the deck because it's only been legal for a few days. I did run this at locals, or at least a very similar build to this at my locals on Saturday, and I ended up going 3-1. I lost round 1 to like Dinosaur. I lost the die roll, and then I got locked out by Barrier Statue of the Storm Winds game 1, and then game 2 I bricked. But then I won out from there. I played another dinosaur and beat them. I played against I think it was pure Eldritch. I didn't see any Synchro or any Numeron cards, and then I beat that. And then I played against Altergeist and beat that. But yeah, I love this deck. Like, I'm super in love with this deck. It's just got so many insane plays. I feel like when it's built and played properly, it's very difficult to stop. Like, it's kind of like Adamantipator, where you just kind of have to have multiple answers and hope your opponent just can't extend, because if you wait too long for them to get into their combos, like, you actually just can't stop it. So you have to stop them at the beginning. But yeah, I know there was a lot of builds, or there was a lot of Infernoble Knight decks at the LCS this weekend, and I saw a couple deck lists, and like, when I say stuff like this, I'm not trying to throw shade or like try to assert that I'm better, but I was really not impressed with a lot of the decks I saw at the LCS. Like, nothing but respect for players who can consistently top, but there were so many questionable deck building choices that I saw from so many of them that, like, these are things that I feel like the OCG realized and solved like months ago. And like, there's been so many write-ups on the Infernoble Knight deck in Japan that I'm surprised that like some of these just mistakes were still just being commonly made. But you know, I didn't enter anything, so like I can't just like assert that I'm correct, but I just personally disagreed with a lot of stuff that I saw. But yeah, let's just get into the deck profile. I've again, like, really love this deck. I've been playtesting it a lot. Super excited that it's out. Really enjoying it. Yeah. So instead of going by monster, spell, and trap for this deck profile, I'm gonna go by like the order of like the deck building curve from the book Road to the King, because I think it's a very, well, for one, I think the book's really good, but I also think that it's the better way to deck build, because it shows you like it better shows the role every card in the deck plays, as opposed to just saying, oh, monster, spell, trap. So it better shows off like the overall balance of the deck. And when building this deck, this is like the closest I got to having like the exact recommended ratios of like every like card type in the curve. Like, the only thing that was like I like went over by 1 in terms of extenders, and obviously it's not like solid rules, but it's just like it was that close to like just being that purely balanced of a deck, and I love that. So yeah, so I'm going to start out with the starter cards. So these are all the cards that just get your game going. So 3 Infernoble Knight Ogier, 3 Sublimation Knight, 3 Infernoble Arms Durendal, 3 Heritage of the Chalice, and 1 Rhoda. So yeah, 13 of them. You generally want to have 11 to 13 starters. That way it's just the easiest to get your game going. So I want to talk about, well, these are all like obvious, like this searches your other starters, this searches your other starters, and this searches your, like, these are all searchers. That's so obvious. I want to talk about these guys. I saw a lot of builds, and by that I mean like a couple like in the top builds. I saw them playing only 1 Ogier, and I do not get that. Ogier is, in my opinion, the single best starter deck in this deck, aside from, you know, like Heritage and Rhoda, which search him and can search other cards. But like, I think this card is fantastic for the sheer fact that he gets you to Immortal Phoenix Gearfried, who is like one of the most important cards in the deck. Just like, Gearfried protects you from so many things. He protects you from Nibiru, he protects you from Gamma, he protects you from Ash, Valor, Ogre. Like, obviously, like Gearfried is the reason that you have to hit this deck early, because once Gearfried's on the board and there's an equip spell on board, like, your opponent can't hit you with any of those hand traps. So like, he protects like Fiber and Aurodon, which are like the most important plays to like get you to your full board. And Ogier just like essentially, like, with Ogier you have the 3 Gearfried, you have the 3 Ogier, you have the 3 Heritage and the Rhoda. Like, you just have so many ways to get to Gearfried It's like, I don't know why anybody wouldn't max this card out. Especially because, like, Ogier plus Durendal is, like, full board minus, like... No, Ogier plus Durendal is full board. Ogier plus Renaud is full board. Like, I don't know why people are only playing one of this card. He's so insanely good. I want to see him in every single opening hand. For Sublimation Knight, I saw a lot of builds playing Neospace Connector and Neospace and Aqua Dolphin. And, Connector and Aqua Dolphin are very good cards. I do not think they are good cards for this deck. Or at least I do not think they are the best cards for this deck. I can see more of an argument for, like, debating between Sublimation Knight and Neospace Connector than I can for putting either of them above Ogier. But I still think Sublimation Knight is the better card, purely because he is fire. So, Connector being light and Aqua Dolphin being water is a big deal because they don't synergize with Renaud. If you have to, like, discard a monster for Oliver, you can't discard them for Oliver. Connector strictly only works on normal summon, which means if you open him, you have to start with him. Because if you have, like, a way to... If you open, like, Sublimation Knight and Ogier, and you have a way to get to, like, Fire Flint Lady, you can use both of them if you have to. You can't do that with Dolphin and or Connector. And the biggest thing, really, is that the biggest draw that people have for Connector is that it forces hand traps. Like, your opponent has to bait... They have to hit Connector with Ash or Ogre or Veiler or Gamma or whatever, because if you don't, then Dolphin's going to rip it out of their hand anyway. The thing is that, like I said at the beginning of this video, I feel like the optimal spot to stop this deck if you're going against it is in the opening plays anyway. Like, you because of just, like, Gear Free protecting you from, like, all the big hand traps, and then, like, Borrel Savage protecting you from impermanence, like, you can't wait for them to get to their big power plays. You have to hope you open enough disruption to hit their starter and, like, all of their extenders. Like, that's part of why I think this deck is so crazy, is that it's so difficult to stop properly. And so if you have to stop them at the opening play anyway, then the biggest advantage that Connector has doesn't mean anything, because, like, Connector forces the disruption, but that's probably where they should be disrupting you anyway. Like, if they hold hand traps for later, that's good for you. So I would rather play Sublimation Knight where my opponent might not realize that it's correct to stop that play, and then, like, probably just win easier that way, than have Connector where they're going to feel obligated to do it, and then if they do it, and then I have, like, Renaud in my hand, I can't special summon them. And, like, yeah, like, Renaud's not the only extender in the deck. Like, a lot of people point to, like, oh yeah, you could just, like, search Fire Flint Lady and then summon her, but I would rather, like, have Sublimation, like, summon him, get negated, and then, like, play Heritage of the Chalice, search Durendal, use Durendal to search Renaud, special summon Renaud, and then put the Durendal back in my hand. That just seems like a way better play, because it gives you a follow-up play on the next turn than just, like, searching Fire Flint Lady. I will say, though, that, like, if there were more ways to just get to Ogier, I probably wouldn't even play Sublimation Knight, because I think all of the best opening plays involve Ogier. But Sublimation Knight is, like, a pretty good, like, backup starter. I do side it in the Squeak Knight out a lot of the times going second, because when you go second, you play you open with 6 cards. You generally, like, don't need 13 starters. You can get away with, like, 10 at that point, so... But yeah, that's my spiel on why I don't think Connector is correct for this deck. Like, I don't think... Connector is definitely not a bad card. Like, when I kind of, like, sarcastically said in, like, one of my group chats, I was like, you know, they could, like, instead of, like, banking on Connector, they could play, like, better starters. And, like, one of my friends quoted, like, better starters. I was like, there's a lot of better starters for this deck than Connector. Like, not being fire is a big deal. So, yeah. And, yeah, that's all the starters. So, for extenders, the superior extenders, so, like, the ones that you do want to draw, are Renaud. This guy's insane. Just, like, search him with Durendal, then put the Durendal back in your hand, or, like, he grabs Gear Freed out of the graveyard if you dump it with Ogier. So many, like, good, like, crazy things. Like, he's such a good card. 3 Fire Flint Lady, she's, like, the second best extender, just because she works with any warrior, and if you open up multiple normal summons, so if you open up, like, Ogier and Sublimation Knight, you can play her, and then, like, she can sacrifice herself to summon, like, the other one. So yeah, she's really good. One Oliver. Initially I was doing like 3-3-3, and then I wanted to fit more defensive cards, so I ended up going to 3-2-2. But really, like, Fire Flint Lady is just such a better extender than Oliver, and that, like, I would rather just see Fire Flint Lady more often. And Oliver is very easily searched, because you can search him with Rhoda, you can search him with Heritage of the Chalice, you can search him with Durendal. If you open, like, Ogier, and then you already have Gearfried in your hand, you can dump Oliver with Ogier. And then, so that's another way to search Oliver. So I really feel like it's not hard to get to Oliver. And he is, like, the most taxing extender, because he does cost a card from your hand. And then, like, it's just so easy to get to him anyway that, like, you really only need one, I feel. Like, if I wanted to play, like, less defense and more extenders, I would probably put 2 more of him in, but I think, like, the defense is pretty important, especially given, like, the format that we're in. Yeah. And then, Astolfo. This card is, like... I feel like she's, like, strictly the worst of, like, the monster-based extenders, but she's still really useful by pure fact of that she is a Noble Knight. And that, so you can search her easily. So if you already have Fireflint Lady, and you need another extender, it's just so easy to get to Astolfo. I really think that's just the biggest reason to play her. Only one, obviously, because one, she's not the best out of any of these, and she is also once per duel, for some reason. So, yeah. And then, Living Fossil. I play, I think, 5 different equip spell names in this deck. There's, like, a couple combos where you end up dumping 4, but more often than not, you're dumping 2 or dumping 1. So you don't need more than that. But Living Fossil is just, like, one of the... It's probably the best equip spell besides Durendal. And, like, obviously, like, Phoenix Blade and Smoke Grenade, which are just needed for engine stuff. Just because it's a Monster Reborn. So, yeah. So those are, like, the, like, superior, like, better extenders, the ones that you generally are okay with drawing. Additional extenders are the ones that raise the ceiling of the deck, but don't really, like, they're not really that great to draw. Like, they're not, like, your game's not ruined if you draw them, but you would prefer to just, like, search them out. Which are Jet Synchron and Olion. This is for Fiber, obviously. Drawing Jet Synchron is annoying, but at least you can summon with Fire. If you draw Olion, you kind of have to, like, rework your combos, which isn't too difficult, but you kind of just end up not having Charles when you draw Olion, but you can still end on, like, Savage and Herald of the Arclight and Gearfried. So it's just, like, slightly less broken, I guess. But yeah. 1 Secret 6 Samurai Genba and 1 Super Quantum Red Layer. So this is the combo that, like, these cards are needed for the combo that play around in permanence. Basically, with a Sold, you summon Genba instead of, like, Oliver or Renaud. And then a Sold makes Link Cross, you get 2 tokens, so you make Martial Metal Marcher, revive him, and then you make Tatsunoko. And then a Sold adds the Red Layer to your hand, and then the Tatsunoko and the Red Layer make Borreload Savage, which protects Fiber and Auroradon from impermanence. And I didn't give that play as much credit as I should have initially. Auroradon and Fiber are definitely the biggest choke points of this deck if you don't have them protected by something. And Gearfried doesn't protect them from impermanence, so impermanence was, like, a really big problem for this deck. But this play kind of just, like, lets you just completely play around it, so then impermanence is now also a non-issue if you get that far. It also, like, the other thing it really solved is that when you're dumping 4 for Oliver, you are really, like, ripping most of the equip spells out of your deck, which makes it hard to, like, follow up on the next turn with the second Assault, which is very much something this deck can do. So with Genba only dumping 2, I really like that aspect about it as well. But yeah. So, like, Red Layer is not super awful to draw, but I still feel like he's not one of the better extenders just because he's more restrictive. You have to control no monsters to summon him. So, like, generally I don't want to start with him. I prefer my extenders to be ones that I play in response to my plays getting negated. He's one I have to preemptively drop. He's still, like, decent, but I definitely don't think I would want to play more than the one of him. And if you draw him, it's fine. Like, you can play him, and then if you need him for the play, you can just play. Because you can play even if you don't do the Borreload Savage combo. But if you don't need him, then you just fuse him with, or you sync him with Tatsunoko on the board. So, and then Genba's not terrible to draw because if you draw him, you just summon Fireflint Lady instead, and then she tributes herself to summon Genba. So, yeah. Really, the only one of these that's kind of awful to draw is Olion, but it's not awful enough to justify playing more than one. So, yeah. And then the last 3 equip spells, which are also just like additional extenders. So Phoenix Blade and Smoke Grenade, Confiscation is pretty good in 2020, and constantly getting back card advantage is also pretty good. I know that the OCG, one of the biggest problems they had with, aside from the reasons I said with Connector being bad, was that like the deck also can't really afford to discard often in the OCG, but Phoenix Blade just lets you do it for free. So, and then I consider Autonomous Action Unit a reactive extender, and this is kind of like the flex equip spell. I feel like Durendal, Living Fossil, Smoke Grenade, and Phoenix Blade are all like those are the field spells you absolutely should play. And then the last spot, you can play like Arfudutor, you can play Joyous, the other Noble Arms that grabs from Graveyard, or you can play Autonomous Action Unit. I was playing Arfudutor on Saturday, but it's as far as core spot removal goes, it's not really that great because it can only hit set cards. And really, it's not really a big thing right now. Autonomous Action Unit, at least, can be an extender. Like if your opponent like ashes you or veilers you, you can Autonomous Action Unit to grab it, and then just like make Needle Fiber. If they, if you're playing the Mirror, you can Autonomous Action Unit one of their Noble Knights and play that way. So like there's ways that this can work, but I consider it a reactive extender because it relies on your opponent doing something. What they obviously should do is just errata and unban Premature Burial, clearly. Yeah. So then, other cards. So Gearfried, I consider this the deck's bomb. Just the card that requires a bit of setup, but is really powerful when he hits the board. That's generally what a bomb is, and Gearfried fits that pretty perfectly. You can use him as an extender, but you generally don't want to. Squeak Knight, engine requirement. This card doesn't really provide anything on its own, but it makes Sublimation Knight a 1-card combo. So. And then for defense, we play 3 Ash Blossom and 3 Impermanence. I think these are just the most generically useful hand traps right now. I was playing Ogre on Saturday, but Rise, it's funny because like Ogre became really popular after Battle of the Legend because of the Numeron cards. And then Rise just kind of made Ogre not that good again. Like, it's not bad, but like Numeron isn't like super prevalent like it was right after Battle of the Legend. At least not at my locals, and it didn't seem like it was really that huge at the LCS either. And Ogre is mostly just fine-tuned to stop Numeron, and it just happened to be a card that was decent enough against everything else. But like with Dogmatica and with this deck running around, I think you would rather just have the more generic stuff like Ash and Impermanence. So I ended up just switching out Ogre for Ash. I considered maining Gamma, but I didn't want to just because the card's only really good when you go second. I liked it more in decks like Dragon Link, where a lot of my starter plays did just leave me empty on the board. Like, you know, like if I played Cyphered and they ashed that, or if I played Chaos Space and they ashed that, you could Gamma if your opponent actually just like for some reason tried to stop either of those plays. And it also was just an alternate search target for Chaos Space, which was another big thing about it. But I don't really like Gamma in this deck in the main, just because it's basically dead going first, and as a combo deck I would rather have most of my cards be live. And at least like these cards, if your opponent actually does stop you, then you have this defense just in case. So yeah, I'm pretty happy just playing these in the main, and then siding other defense if I need it. And then the last card is Upstart Goblin, Placeholder. So yeah, it's 40 cards. I know 60 cards is pretty popular also in the OCG, but I feel like in the OCG it makes more sense because they have more, like they have to play more stuff to answer like Maxine and stuff, so you know, like Cross Out Designator, Called by the Grave and all that. And they have other like big extenders, like they have 2 emergency teleports, so the assault mode activate engine is pretty useful for them because of that. I think in the TCG it's better to just like hard focus on just like prioritize the best cards in the deck, which are, you know, Ogier and like sort of Sublimation Knight. Just like focus on like the actual Noble Knight cards, and it's supposed to just like Warrior extending. And like none of the equip spells are really particularly bad to draw, except for like the worst ones are probably Divine Sword and Smoke Grenade, but even then they're not horrible to draw. So yeah, I don't really think you need to play the 60 card deck for that. And then like the reason I didn't play Ignite is just because like everything in the deck is inherently a -1, and in a vacuum it's like so absurdly powerful. But given how disruptive the current format is, and like you kind of just have to have interaction with your opponent, I just didn't really think the Ignite build was proper at the moment. So yeah, let's go into the extra deck. So for links, really straightforward. 2 Assault. If they're stupid enough to like negate the first one on summon, or if they like negate the add to hand effect, you have the second one. If they don't do that, you have the second one for follow-up plays the next turn. That's the nice thing about this deck, is that it can actually resolve Assault twice. So you set up your board turn 1, and if they somehow survive, you can Assault on the next turn and just access code them for game. Link Ross, Fiber. I have actually considered playing 2 of this card, because it is feasible that you could use him twice. The thing is that in most of the situations where you can use them twice, I think you could also just Assault again. So the biggest reason I would want to play the second one is if for whatever reason the first one gets negated, I have the second one as a follow-up, and it's still something I'm considering. Like there's one flex spot in this extra deck that I don't think is like super necessary, so I could see it becoming a second Fiber. One Auroradon, Access Code Talker. I actually, on Saturday, gamed my friend who was playing Altergeist by making Auroradon, not activating the effect, reviving the Jet Synchron, summoning Access Code Talker, and swinging for 83 because I had Savage on board. So, yeah, that was pretty crazy. Actually, it was like 9,000 or something, because the Borolo Savage had Assault on it. Yeah, that's all the Link monsters. It's definitely not a super Link-heavy deck, which I love, because it is a Synchro deck, and that might be my favorite thing about this. So, Charles... Obviously, you want to end on him to like just be spot removal and to rip a card out of your opponent's hand with Smoke Grenade. Roland, he climbs into your plays to get you to Charles, and then he gets advantage at the end of the turn because he's a Skarm. Launcelin. So I didn't initially understand why this card was played, and then I realized that the reason is that if you open Ogier and Renaud, Launcelin is what gets you to Durendal. So yeah, this guy is definitely really important for that. Martial Metal Marcher and Tatsunoko for the play that gets Savage out before you do Fiber. Savage because he's a good card. Omega, you need another level 8 for... So like aside from like the Red Layer and the Genba, the other things you need for the early Savage player are Tatsunoko, and you need a level 8. Because after you start doing all your Fiber combos, you're going to end up using Roland and a Mecha Phantom Beast token to make a level 8, and then Jet Synchron into level 8 make Charles. So Omega is obviously just the best generic level 8 besides Savage Dragon. So you just make him, and then you can use him to like recycle a card in your deck. You can take something you don't want in your opponent's graveyard, put it back in their deck, and stuff like that. So yeah, that's the reason Omega's played. Herald of the Arclight. This was another thing that made me really like the Tatsunoko combo, is that Herald of the Arclight generally only ended up on boards without that play if you opened like Supremely Broken. But with the Tatsunoko line, you end up either leaving Auroradon on the board, or you end up leaving a token on the board. So if you were able to get to Oliver, and like actually summon him as a level 1 tuner, then you can use the extra token and the Oliver to make Herald of the Arclight. So Herald ends up on the board a lot more with this line, which is why like one of the 3 reasons I think this line of play is so good. And then the last card, this is the flex card in the extra deck, and it's Coral Dragon. I've just debated with myself what I want this card to be. Right now I have it on Coral Dragon because Marcher and a token can climb to this, pop a card, and then climb into Charles, and then draw you a card. But I've considered this, I've considered Formula Synchron, I've considered Hyper Librarian, I've considered Trishula, I've considered the second Needle Fiber. Like, I really don't know. Like, it's the most flexible spot. Like, this card's definitely not necessary. It came up once on Saturday, but there was also another situation where I was like, wow, I can make Trishula. So, like, yeah, I don't really know what I want this to be, but for now it's just Coral Dragon. I feel like it was the safest option to play. But yeah. And that's the extra deck. For side deck, Banker Tops, obviously. Gamma, like I said, I don't really like this card in the main deck because it's not really good going first, but it is fantastic going second. It's like going second, it is probably without a doubt the best hand trap. So I definitely will side this in if I'm going second and playing against a deck that doesn't like getting negated. 3 Lightning Storm. I was also playing Cosmic Cyclone for a while, just because like I was kind of afraid of Mystic Mine, I guess. But honestly, if anybody's playing Mystic Mine, they can fucking have the win. Sure, like why not? Like nobody's really playing that card, and if they really want to be that degenerate, you know, you can't really win them all. And I don't really like Cosmic Cyclone against any other deck. Like I'm just not big on like 1-for-1 removal like that, so I only ever really play it out of necessity. I could play Twin Twisters, but this deck does kind of have an issue with not being able to discard. Like, you can discard Phoenix Blade, obviously, but the point at which I would probably need to Twin Twister is probably before I even get the Phoenix Blade, so I don't really like the idea of that card either. 2 triple tactical talents, or whatever the hell, like triple tactics talent. This card is basically... I view this card as what I would want out of Called by the Grave, in that it's a card that's really good going first or second in terms of dealing with disruption, because it's... The thing I didn't like about Called by the Grave is that it doesn't actually net you any advantage. So if you open it and your opponent doesn't actually have something that you can Call by the Grave, it doesn't do anything. The thing I like about Triple Tactics talent is that, like, it also has that issue, but it can respond to more cards because it just needs your opponent to activate a monster effect. But then if they do that, you just get advantage, because if you're going first, you just draw 2, and then if you're going second, you can draw 2, you can take a card out of their hand, you can take control of their monster. Like, I honestly kind of wanted to main this card, but I just didn't really have room, so I just settled for siding it. The only reason I'm playing 2 is because that's all I have. Like, I tried getting 3, but my only friend who had these for sale only had 2. So I'm just playing 2 for now, and then I'm playing a Magical Midbreaker Field. If I get a 3rd Tactics talent, this will probably become that. But Midbreaker Field's not bad either. This deck doesn't really need the Field Spell Zone. So, yeah. 3 evenly matched. This seemed... I actually just added this. This seems really popular at the LCS, and yeah, it... Just, like, being able to just deal with whatever Dogmatica does, being able to deal with, like, random rogue shit, aside from Mystic Mine. So, yeah. And then Red Reboot. And, yeah, that's the entire deck. This video went on for pretty long, but I also feel like I went into great detail on, like, a lot of my personal thoughts and theory on how the deck should play, so hopefully you guys found this very informative, as opposed to just looking at the deck and just like seeing, oh well, he plays this, he plays that. I definitely prefer explaining why I make my choices, and this is a deck that I've put a lot of thought into, and it's very new, and I'm seeing a lot of people do a lot of different things with it, so I really wanted to explain how I feel about the deck and how I think it's the best way to play it. So yeah, I will continue to play this at locals. I might actually consider entering an online tournament, even though I don't really like them, just because I want to show people, yeah, this is how the deck should be played, but I don't know if we'll do that. I don't know if it's worth doing that just for the sake of trying to prove something, just because, like, I don't really like enjoy playing the game online. I don't find it as fun. But yeah, overall, I really love this deck. I'm definitely going to keep playing it for as long as it's good. And yeah, and I'll see you guys next time.